Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. Here's a question that might ruin your perspective on everything. What if most of your suffering is completely meaningless and you're choosing to suffer for no reason at all? Viktor Frankl survived 4 Nazi concentration camps, lost his entire family to the Holocaust, and endured conditions that would break most people within days. When he was liberated, he weighed 80 pounds and had lost everything he'd ever cared about. But here's what's disturbing. Frankl realized that many people living in complete freedom and comfort suffer more psychological pain than he did in the camps. How is that possible? Because Frankl discovered something in those camps that most people never learn in their entire comfortable lives: the difference between suffering that has meaning and suffering that doesn't. Right now, you're probably suffering from at least 3 things: a job that doesn't fulfill you, relationships that don't satisfy you, and a general sense that life should be more meaningful than it feels. You wake up most days with a vague sense of emptiness that you try to fill with distractions, achievements, or purchases. Here's what would terrify you. Frankl would look at your suffering and say it's completely optional. Not because your problems aren't real, but because you're suffering without purpose, which is the most wasteful form of human misery possible. In the concentration camps, Frankl watched some prisoners survive unimaginable conditions while others gave up and died, even when they were physically stronger. The difference wasn't physical, it was psychological. The survivors had found a reason to endure the suffering. The others were just suffering. But my problems are different, you're thinking. I'm not in a concentration camp. My suffering comes from modern life, career dissatisfaction, relationship issues, existential emptiness. Here's Frankl's brutal insight. It doesn't matter what's causing your suffering. What matters is whether you can find meaning in it. And most people can't because they've never learned how. You're suffering from a job you hate, but you haven't found any purpose in that suffering, so it's just pointless misery. You're suffering from loneliness, but you're not using that loneliness to understand yourself better or motivate meaningful connections, so it's just empty pain. You're suffering from anxiety about the future, but you're not using that anxiety to clarify your values or priorities, so it's just wasted mental energy. Frankl discovered that humans can endure almost any suffering if they can find meaning in it. But suffering without meaning is psychological poison that slowly destroys your will to live. The question isn't how to eliminate suffering from your life. That's impossible and would make you weaker anyway. The question is how to transform meaningless suffering into meaningful suffering. Because once you learn how to do that, everything changes. Your problems don't disappear, but they stop controlling your life. Your pain doesn't vanish, but it starts serving a purpose. And that purpose, that meaning you create from your suffering, becomes the foundation for a life that's actually worth living, regardless of your circumstances. Part 2. The psychology that could have saved your wasted years. Frankl didn't just survive the Holocaust. He used his experience to revolutionize psychology with a simple but radical idea. The primary human drive isn't pleasure, power, or even survival. It's meaning. He called it logotherapy, and it explains why you've been miserable despite having everything previous generations could only dream of. Traditional psychology says you're unhappy because you're not getting enough of what you want: more money, better relationships, greater success, fewer problems. So you spend your life trying to maximize pleasure and minimize pain. But Frankl realized this approach creates the exact opposite of what you're seeking. The more you chase happiness directly, the more elusive it becomes. The more you try to avoid suffering, the more meaningless your life feels. Think about the happiest moments in your life. Were they moments when you were pursuing happiness, or moments when you were pursuing something meaningful and happiness happened as a side effect? Probably the latter. You felt most alive when you were working towards something that mattered to you, helping someone you cared about, or overcoming a challenge that tested your capabilities. You weren't thinking about happiness. You were thinking about purpose, and happiness emerged naturally from that sense of purpose. This is why people who seem to have everything often feel empty, while people facing significant challenges often report deep satisfaction with their lives. It's not about what happens to you. It's about what meaning you create from what happens to you. Frankl observed this in the concentration camps with scientific precision. Prisoners who found meaning in their suffering, whether through helping others, maintaining dignity, or holding on to future goals, survived at much higher rates than those who focused only on survival or escape from pain. The ones who died weren't necessarily the weakest physically. They were the ones who couldn't find any reason to endure what they were experiencing. Now apply this to your own life. How much of your mental energy goes toward trying to avoid discomfort, minimize effort, or escape from difficulties? How much time do you spend trying to engineer a life with less stress, fewer problems, and more ease? Frankl would say you're accidentally making yourself miserable by pursuing the wrong goal. Instead of trying to minimize suffering, you should be trying to maximize meaning. This doesn't mean seeking out unnecessary pain or making your life harder on purpose. It means reframing the inevitable difficulties of life as opportunities to create meaning rather than obstacles to happiness. Your job is stressful. Instead of just complaining about it, ask what values you can express or skills you can develop through handling that stress well. Your relationship has problems. Instead of just wishing it were easier, ask what you can learn about yourself and love through working on those problems. Your life feels empty? Instead of just trying to fill it with more activities or achievements, ask what unique contribution you can make to the world that only you can make. The shift from seeking happiness to seeking meaning is the difference between being a passive victim of your circumstances and an active creator of your experience. And that shift, from happiness-seeking to meaning-making, is what transforms pointless suffering into purposeful growth. Part 3. The existential vacuum that's eating your soul. Here's something that'll explain why you feel empty despite having more opportunities, choices, and resources than 99% of humans who have ever lived. Frankl identified what he called the existential vacuum, the widespread sense of meaninglessness that comes from having too much freedom and not enough purpose. Your grandparents didn't have existential crises about finding themselves because their roles, values, and life paths were largely predetermined by family, community, and economic necessity. They didn't have to create meaning. It was provided by their circumstances. You have to create your own meaning in a world that offers infinite options but no clear direction. And most people have no idea how to do this, so they end up feeling empty despite being surrounded by possibilities. This is why depression, anxiety, and suicide rates are highest in the most prosperous, free, and technologically advanced societies. It's not that life is objectively worse, it's that life feels subjectively meaningless. Frankl called this Sunday neurosis, that sense of emptiness that hits when you're not distracted by work or obligations and have to confront the question of what your life is actually for. Think about your last weekend or vacation. Did you feel energized and fulfilled? Or did you feel restless and vaguely depressed? If it's the latter, you're experiencing the existential vacuum. You have time and freedom, but you don't have a compelling reason to use that time and freedom in any particular way. So you fill the space with entertainment, social media, shopping, or other distractions that provide temporary stimulation but no lasting satisfaction. The existential vacuum manifests in 3 main ways, and you probably recognize all of them. Boredom. Nothing feels genuinely interesting or engaging. You scroll through options, shows to watch, places to go, things to buy, but nothing captures your attention for long because nothing connects to a deeper purpose. Conformity. You do what everyone else is doing because you have no internal compass guiding your choices. You follow trends, seek approval, and make decisions based on social expectations rather than personal meaning. Addiction. You become dependent on external sources of stimulation, substances, activities, or experiences, because you can't generate internal motivation or satisfaction from your daily life. The cruel irony is that the more options you have, the more likely you are to feel paralyzed by choice. The more freedom you have, the more likely you are to feel lost. The more comfort you have, the more likely you are to feel empty. This isn't a character flaw. It's a predictable response to living in a society that's optimized for individual choice, but provides no framework for making meaningful choices. Your ancestors had fewer options but clearer purposes. You have infinite options but no obvious purpose. And without purpose, all those options feel overwhelming rather than liberating. The solution isn't to eliminate your options or return to a more restrictive way of life. The solution is to learn how to create meaning within freedom, to develop the psychological skills necessary for purposeful living in a world of infinite possibilities. This requires shifting from asking, "What do I want?" to asking, "What does life want from me?" From "How can I be happy?" to "How can I be useful?" From "What can I get?" to "What can I give?" The existential vacuum isn't filled by getting more of what you think you want. It's filled by discovering what you're uniquely positioned to contribute to the world and then organizing your life around that contribution. Once you find that purpose, the vacuum disappears. Not because your circumstances change, but because you found a reason that makes any circumstances workable. Part 4. The tragic optimism that could save your life. Here's where Frankl's philosophy gets radical. He argued that the goal of life isn't to be happy, successful, or even comfortable. The goal is to be worthy of your suffering. He called this tragic optimism, the ability to maintain hope and find meaning despite the inevitable tragedies, losses, and disappointments that define human existence. This isn't toxic positivity or delusional thinking. Frankl knew better than most people how genuinely terrible life can be. But he also discovered that meaning can be found in the worst possible circumstances, and that meaning is what makes life worth living regardless of what happens to you. Think about the people you most admire. Are they people who've had easy lives with no problems? Or are they people who've faced significant challenges and responded to those challenges in ways that revealed their character and contributed to something larger than themselves? Probably the latter. We admire people not for avoiding suffering, but for transforming suffering into something meaningful: wisdom, compassion, strength, or service to others. Tragic optimism means accepting that life includes unavoidable suffering while maintaining faith that this suffering can serve a purpose if you respond to it consciously. Your career disappointments can teach you what you actually value. Your relationship failures can show you how to love more skillfully. Your health problems can clarify what really matters. Your financial struggles can develop your resourcefulness and resilience. But only if you approach these challenges as opportunities for meaning-making rather than just obstacles to happiness. This is the opposite of how most people think about problems. Most people see suffering as evidence that something's wrong with their life that needs to be fixed. Frankl saw suffering as raw material for creating meaning that couldn't be created any other way. The death of someone you love teaches you about the preciousness of relationships in a way that no amount of happiness could teach you. The loss of a job forces you to examine your priorities in a way that success never would. The experience of depression shows you the value of mental health in a way that consistent happiness never could. None of this means you should seek out suffering or be grateful for genuinely terrible experiences. It means you can choose to extract meaning from whatever suffering life brings you, rather than just enduring it or trying to escape from it. Tragic optimism is the psychological skill that allows you to say, "This is difficult and painful, and I wouldn't have chosen it. but I can choose what to do with it now that it's here. This perspective doesn't eliminate pain, but it eliminates the additional suffering that comes from believing your pain is pointless. It doesn't make problems disappear, but it makes problems workable by connecting them to larger purposes. The optimism isn't about believing everything will work out perfectly. It's about believing that you can create meaning from whatever works out, however it works out. And that belief, that meaning is always possible regardless of circumstances, is what allows some people to thrive in conditions that would destroy others. The question isn't whether you'll face tragedy, loss, and disappointment. You will. The question is whether you'll be prepared to find meaning in those experiences when they arrive. Part 5. The 3 sources of meaning, and why you're probably missing all of them. Frankl identified 3 primary sources of meaning that can make any life worth living, regardless of circumstances. Most people accidentally organize their lives in ways that minimize access to all 3. The first source is creative values, what you give to the world through your work, art, ideas, or contributions. This isn't about having a creative job or being an artist. It's about finding ways to express your unique capabilities and make something that wouldn't exist without you. Your job might be boring, but you can still find creative meaning by doing it exceptionally well, helping colleagues, or using the skills you develop there for purposes that matter to you. Your daily routine might be mundane, but you can find creative meaning by approaching ordinary tasks with extraordinary attention, care, or innovation. The key is shifting from asking, "What can I get from this?" to "What can I contribute to this?" Every situation becomes an opportunity to create something valuable rather than just endure something difficult. The second source is experiential values, what you receive from the world through relationships, nature, art, ideas, or encounters with beauty and truth. This isn't about collecting experiences or maximizing pleasure. It's about developing the capacity to be deeply affected by what you encounter. Most people rush through their days so quickly that they barely notice what they're experiencing. They're physically present but psychologically absent, scrolling through their phones instead of engaging with their actual environment. Finding experiential meaning requires slowing down enough to actually receive what life is offering you. The conversation with a friend, the sunset you walk past without seeing, the music playing in the background that you're not really hearing. The third source is attitudinal values, the stance you take toward unavoidable suffering. When you can't change your circumstances, you can still choose your attitude toward those circumstances, and that choice can be a source of profound meaning. This is where Frankl's philosophy becomes most powerful and most difficult. Anyone can find meaning when life is going well, but can you find meaning when life is going badly? Can you choose responses to suffering that make you proud of who you're becoming, even when you can't control what's happening to you? The person who loses their job and uses the experience to discover new possibilities. The patient who faces illness with dignity and courage. The individual who experiences betrayal and chooses to become more discerning rather than more bitter. These attitudinal choices don't eliminate suffering, but they transform suffering from something that happens to you into something you do. A conscious choice to respond in ways that reflect your values rather than just your circumstances. Here's what's disturbing. Most people accidentally minimize their access to all 3 sources of meaning. They do work that doesn't use their real capabilities, rush through experiences without really experiencing them, and respond to difficulties with attitudes that make them smaller rather than larger. Then they wonder why life feels empty despite being filled with activities, achievements, and acquisitions. The solution isn't to change your entire life overnight. It's to start finding meaning in your current life by approaching it more consciously, creating more intentionally, experiencing more deeply, and choosing your attitudes more deliberately. Meaning isn't something you find. It's something you make, moment by moment, choice by choice, regardless of your circumstances. Part 6. why happiness is a side effect, not a goal. Here's the paradox that explains why you're miserable despite trying so hard to be happy. The more directly you pursue happiness, the more it evades you. But the more you pursue meaning, the more happiness emerges as a natural byproduct. Frankl called this the happiness trap, the counterproductive strategy of organizing your life around maximizing positive emotions and minimizing negative ones. Think about your current life goals. How many of them are essentially different versions of be happier? Make more money so you can be happier. Find a better relationship so you can be happier. Get in better shape so you can be happier. Achieve more success so you can be happier. This approach seems logical, but it creates a psychological trap. When happiness becomes your primary goal, every moment you're not happy feels like failure. Every negative emotion becomes evidence that something's wrong with your life that needs to be fixed. You end up spending enormous amounts of mental energy monitoring your happiness levels, comparing your happiness to other people's apparent happiness, and trying to engineer circumstances that you think will make you happier. But happiness isn't something you can create directly. It's something that emerges naturally when you're engaged in activities that align with your values and contribute to purposes larger than your immediate comfort. Think about the times you've been genuinely happy, not just pleased or entertained, but deeply satisfied with your life. You probably weren't thinking about happiness at all. You were probably absorbed in something meaningful, helping someone you cared about, working on a challenging project, having a deep conversation, or making progress on a goal that mattered to you. The happiness wasn't the point. It was the result of doing something worthwhile. This is why people who make happiness their primary goal often end up anxious and depressed, while people who focus on meaning and contribution often report high levels of life satisfaction even when facing significant challenges. Frankl observed this pattern in the concentration camps. Prisoners who focused on surviving until they could be reunited with loved ones, complete unfinished work, or help fellow prisoners were more likely to maintain their mental health than those who focused primarily on avoiding pain or maximizing comfort. The ones who stayed psychologically strong weren't trying to be happy. They were trying to be useful, loving, or true to their values under impossible circumstances. This doesn't mean you should ignore your emotions or accept unnecessary suffering. It means you should stop treating happiness as a measure of whether your life is going well and start treating meaning as that measure instead. A meaningful life will include plenty of happiness, but it will also include sadness, frustration, anxiety, and other difficult emotions that arise naturally when you care deeply about things that matter. The goal isn't to eliminate negative emotions, it's to ensure that both your positive and negative emotions are connected to purposes worth having emotions about. Better to be sad about something meaningful than happy about something trivial. Better to be anxious about goals that matter than relaxed about goals that don't. Better to be frustrated while working on important problems than content while avoiding important problems. When meaning becomes your compass, happiness becomes a welcome companion rather than an elusive destination. And that shift, from chasing happiness to creating meaning, is what transforms a life from something you endure into something you embrace. Part 7. The responsibility that will set you free. After all this talk about meaning, suffering, and purpose, here's the most important thing Frankl discovered. You are 100% responsible for finding meaning in your life, regardless of your circumstances, and no one else can do this work for you. This isn't motivational speaking, it's existential reality. Your parents can't give you meaning. Your job can't provide meaning. Your relationships can't create meaning for you. Even your achievements can't generate meaning automatically. Meaning is something you must create through the choices you make about how to interpret and respond to whatever life brings you. This is simultaneously the most terrifying and most liberating insight in all of psychology. You are the author of your life's meaning, which means you have unlimited power to make your life meaningful, starting right now. But it also means you can't blame anyone else if your life feels meaningless. You can't wait for better circumstances, different opportunities, or other people to change. The meaning-making is entirely up to you. This starts with taking responsibility for your interpretations. The same event can be meaningful or meaningless depending on how you choose to understand it. Losing a job can be a catastrophe or an opportunity. Ending a relationship can be a failure or a learning experience. Facing illness can be a curse or a chance to discover your strength. You don't control what happens to you, but you absolutely control what you make it mean. It continues with taking responsibility for your responses. Even when you can't change your circumstances, you can always choose how to respond to them. And those responses, whether they reflect courage or cowardice, growth or stagnation, service or selfishness, determine whether your life becomes meaningful or remains empty. It culminates in taking responsibility for your unique contribution. Nobody else has your exact combination of experiences, capabilities, and perspectives. Nobody else can make the specific contribution to the world that you're positioned to make. If you don't make it, it won't get made. This isn't about becoming famous or achieving great external success. It's about fulfilling your responsibility to become the person you're capable of becoming and offer the gifts you're capable of offering. The person who brings exceptional care to an ordinary job. The parent who breaks generational patterns of dysfunction. The friend who listens deeply in a world of shallow conversation. The citizen who acts with integrity in small situations where no one is watching. These contributions might never be recognized or rewarded, but they create meaning for the person making them and often ripple out to affect others in ways that can't be measured. Frankl's ultimate insight is that meaning isn't something you find by looking inward. It's something you create by looking outward and asking, what is life asking of me in this situation? What can I contribute that would make this situation better? How can I respond in a way that reflects the person I want to become? These questions transform you from a passive victim of circumstances into an active creator of meaning. They make every situation, no matter how difficult or mundane, into an opportunity to make choices that matter. The responsibility is total, which means the freedom is total. You can make your life meaningful regardless of what has happened to you, what is happening to you, or what might happen to you. But you have to choose to take that responsibility. Nobody can force you to find meaning in your suffering, create meaning through your contributions, or maintain meaning despite your setbacks. The choice to make your life meaningful is the most important choice you'll ever make. And you have to make it over and over again, in situation after situation, for your entire life. If this exploration of logotherapy has shown you anything, it should be this. Your suffering doesn't have to be pointless. Your life doesn't have to feel empty. Your problems don't have to defeat you. But transforming suffering into meaning, emptiness into purpose, and problems into opportunities requires the conscious choice to take complete responsibility for the life you're creating through your responses to whatever life brings you. That responsibility is terrifying because it means you can't blame anyone else for your meaninglessness. But it's also liberating because it means you have the power to create meaning starting right now, exactly where you are, with exactly what you have. Next week, we're exploring Marx's theory of alienation and why your job might literally be stealing your soul. Subscribe now, because understanding how capitalism affects your psychology might explain why you feel like a stranger in your own life. Your journey toward meaningful living is just beginning, and Frankl's insights are your guide to transforming whatever suffering you face into something that serves a purpose worthy of your human dignity.